let's jump in. And so let's talk about the first part of your story, your brave story. Um, why don't we kick off by just talking us through how you ended up in France and then just
Yes.
just loop that around to why you ended up going home.
Yes. Yeah. So I ended up in France because I had graduated school. I had studied there during school as well for a little bit, for a year. And when I'd finished my studies, I didn't fully know what I wanted to do. And then this job was presented to me in Lyon, France, which is where I'd studied. So as a 22-year-old, I was like, oh, frick yeah, I'm definitely going to be going to do this. Which I think is funny because in hindsight, that the move was very, very hard.
Mm,
Going over to France by myself and obviously studying in a foreign country is very different from working in a foreign country. So kind of the rose-tinted view of studying, was not the reality of moving to France to work, to have to adjust to French working culture, to have to go through a visa process, which was just absolute hell.
yeah.
Right. I
Oh
think I
man,
went 30 times to the prefecture, and you can relate to all this stuff, right? So
man. That's the amazing thing about living in France is as an expat, if you meet other foreigners in France, you all have a
yeah.
variation of the same story about getting your
Yes.
visa.
No story's the same though.
Yeah.
Somehow everyone's story, there's not like a single process that I think there should be a single process we all should follow, but somehow we all manage to not follow the same the same
Yeah.
process. Do something entirely different. Um,
Yeah.
but I think
Crazy.
it just speaks wonders what, the French system is like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is quite nice though, right? Because we can really kind of relate, I think, and
Oh, totally, man.
yeah.
And so you studied here and then you end up getting an opportunity to have to start a job here in Lyon.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So
Yeah.
I started at Lyon, and I guess again though it was very hard, but I think that it was, in hindsight, it wasn't really a brave decision per se, because it was more of an ignorant decision, right? I think if I knew of kind of the difficulties of that first year, what that would be ahead of time, that would have been a brave decision. But I
Right.
was going in under the lens that everything would be great. I was not very scared at going into this decision, I should say. I really knew that I wanted to go there.
Mm,
And so, yeah, it was only afterwards that you learn how hard it is, that it becomes that way.
totally.
But moving on, so I did a year and a half in Lyon, and then I ended up moving up to Paris. So it was like a year in Lyon, moving up to Paris. I was in Paris for 2.5 years about. Uh, that's where I met you. And at that time, I was really, really liking Paris at the end. My social life was great. I really, I'm being from Oregon, in the United States. So maybe again for some of the listeners out there who
Yeah.
don't know of Oregon, Oregon is a pretty green nature state. Some people have heard, now I've never said this, but some people have said that it is considered the New Zealand of the United States. Haven't you heard this
Wow.
a lot? Don't they say this in
Well,
New Zealand, Joe?
they don't, but it must be really nice. That must mean it's a super nice place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it means it's a nice place. It means it's maybe not so well known, too,
Oh,
kind of like how
true.
New Zealand is. But
Off the beaten
um,
track.
off the beaten track, exactly.
Yeah.
But I guess my point is that it's also nature. People are pretty low key, and so I think in my head I never pictured myself liking a big city like Paris, and
Yeah.
lo and behold, I really really loved it.
Because
And
Lyon would have been more like home for you a bit, at
yeah,
least.
Lyon is
Bit of
more of the
nature
size of
around.
like, yeah, Lyon's more of a city, I think the size of Portland, Oregon, which is the biggest city in Oregon. And I studied in Denver, Colorado, which is about the same size as Lyon as well. So no, Paris was the first kind of world city I was in, and that I really enjoyed it. And I had a really good group of friends. It was really great getting to know you. It was really great getting to know some other people who you and I know together. And I, despite having those feelings, I knew there was something inside of me that just kind of knew that at some point I should probably still be going back to the United States.
Yeah.
Um, in France, as you know, the job market is really quite hard, and so I was not so happy with my job. Uh, I also I miss my friends and family quite dearly, when I was back in France. It was kind of this awful conundrum where I knew that if I were to go back to the United States, I would miss all of these friends I met in France quite a lot.
Mm.
And but if I stayed in France, right, then I would still be super far away from my friends and family.
Yeah.
Uh, and so yeah, that kind of leads into this decision I ultimately had to make, which was whether I were to continue staying in France or if I were to go back to the US.
Yeah. Super interesting. And it's so cool to hear because I think we've had a lot of people we've chatted to, and living in Paris, you meet a lot of people who've obviously moved from all sorts of places around the world to Paris, and you think, like, we've had a lot of chats about how that's their brave story is
Yeah,
coming here, right? But super interesting to hear that for you, the braveness was more in going home to what maybe, well, back to the US to what you maybe knew more. Can you talk us more about that? Like, why did that take more bravery, for example, in your
yeah,
head than coming to a place that you'd never lived before?
yeah, definitely. I know. I was saying the same thing. I think it's kind of ironic. You'd think that the braver story, for me at least, would be the first part. And yeah, in all honesty, it was about, yeah, 10 times, 20 times harder to go back. Um,
Mm,
I I think at that point I'd spent what, it was from 22 to 25 in France. I'd spent my my 20th year to like a little bit into my 21st year in France as well. And so I think that those are some really pivotal years. And at that point, right, you use a lot of your worldviews are formed by the people and the culture around you.
yeah.
Uh, and I think I was just scared about where I fit in at that point. You know,
Mm,
I knew as an American living in France that it would be hard for me to ever truly feel 100% French.
mm,
And I'm sure you can relate to that as well. Um,
totally.
but I also knew that going back to the United States, that I'd changed just considerably since the last time I had truly lived there, and that really scared me too. I think just the it was scary, and it's the truth. I still feel this now, is that I kind of realized that no matter where I was going to be, that I would feel a little different,
Mm, yeah.
that I would not maybe truly feel 100% at home and kind of wherever I was going.
Yeah.
Uh, so that yeah, I think that was a scary thought.
Yeah. And so, like, moving on to, like, you arrive back in the States. You moved to a different city though than the one that you came from, right? So
Yeah.
you're living in Denver.
Hmm.
Yeah. Can you talk us through, like, in that experience of them being back in the US, back in the culture you know, what was it that took the most bravery? And, like, did you have specific kind of brave moments in those first few months, or like,
Yeah, I think I well, once I was actually in the United States, it didn't seem like it was almost like it was done, right? I don't
right?
know if there's a lot of brave moments once I actually that didn't stick out to me once I moved back to the United States. It was still once again kind of the act of moving back, which to me took the most bravery.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it the I think the other thing too is that it was that seemed quite final to me as well, right?
Mm,
So I don't have citizenship. It's not like I can always go back to France when I want to. It would be it's always possible for me to find a job and to come back, I think, if I truly wanted to.
yeah.
Um, but the reality is that's less likely to happen. And I just had a feeling that once I was back in the United States that and we'll still see what happens, but chances are that I wouldn't be coming back again.
Yeah.
So it was just that, it was that bit, and really trying to analyze that. I felt like at the age of 25, just kind of where I wanted to be in life. Um, what mattered to me. Do I see myself in the long term being close to my family? Do I see myself
Yeah.
in the long term being, in kind of around some newer friends I met over in France? All that stuff was just, yeah, it's hard to describe, but it was just very
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, super interesting there to hear about the process you go through, because maybe there's someone listening who's like, I don't know, thinking about this kind of situation in their life and maybe going
Hmm.
home or whatever. You just talked briefly there about, like, the kinds of things you thought through in terms of whether it's the right decision or whatever. I guess the thing is, you're never going to fully know, like, that's the
Yeah,
thing with these big decisions is like, is it the right thing to do? Is it not the right thing to do? And you're never going to
exactly.
be like fully like, yes, this is 100% the right decision.
Hmm.
But yeah, what are all those, you just mentioned them, but like, what sorts of things were you thinking about, and how did you become comfortable with making that step?
Yeah. I think well, first of all, yeah, I totally agree with you about just kind of big decisions. I think that even if you go back to my initial decision to go over to Europe, that was a big decision, but in some ways it wasn't such a big, right? I knew that that was what I wanted to do, and in that way, the decision was quite easy, right? When
Mm,
when I was faced with coming back, I was not at all sure if that was what I wanted to do, and I could have stayed and we could have talked. We could be having this podcast maybe in person, and
yeah,
I'd be talking about how great a decision it was for me to stay, right? I truly think I would have been
yeah.
quite fine if I had stayed.